All right. Can everybody see my screen that I'm sharing?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll just do the introduction here. So good morning, everybody. This is Joe Garfunkel, the chapter leader of our Citizens Climate Lobby in Houston, and this is our monthly meeting. And for the agenda for today, just want to welcome everybody. And so I think from what I can tell, everybody is not new. Everyone has been here at least one time before.
You want to come over here?
And we'll have our guest speaker starting in a few minutes, followed by our miscellaneous topics that we always have. Then we'll go through our status reports from the 5 levers, and then our meeting wrap up. Mark, would you like to do the introduction now? Mark, can you hear me?
Yep.
Would you like to go ahead and do the introduction?
Sure.
Oh, I forgot one thing. I'm sorry. Let me just do this slide. For those of everybody who's there, either online or wherever you are, you may want to scan the QR code or make a note of our web link here. We do have a lot of web links in our agenda slide deck that you may want to refer to later. And so I'll just pause here a few minutes so you can either scan the QR code or make a note of our bit.ly web link there. Okay, did everybody have a chance to get that information?
Yep.
Okay, we'll move on now. All right, Mark, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Welcome everybody to our monthly meeting. And today we're honored to have us our presenter, Ileagh Maclvers. And I know Ileagh from, we go to the same church, which is Live Oak Friends Meeting. But in her professional capacity, she is Interfaith Power and Light's Clean Cars organizer. And what that means is she works to organize people from various faiths to fight for clean transportation all over the U.S. So she's especially passionate about the intersection between climate change and racial, gender, and economic justice. She graduated from University of Houston with a BA in political science, minors in energy and sustainability, music, literature, and women's studies. In her free time, she enjoys reading, practicing yoga, and hiking around the Houston area. So today she's going to inform us about the landscape of electric vehicles. Ileagh, I'll turn it over to you.
Ileagh, did you have your own slide deck you wanted to share? Oh, you're on mute. Yeah. Okay, let me just give access. Sorry, 1 minute. Okay, go ahead and try to share your screen now.
All right. Can everyone see? Oh,
Yeah.
Mark, I think you need to turn off your speaker. So like turn your volume all the way down. Is that better? Yes, that is better. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for that illustrious introduction. It is wonderful to be here with you all today. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes, we can see now. Thank you.
I think that's a yes.
That's
I realize
yes.
that both of our speakers are muted, so we can't hear anything. But if a thumbs up would be great. You can see my slides? Great, phenomenal. All right. So my presentation today is going to be about the zero emission transportation transformation and my work at Interfaith Power and Light. So before we get into these fast facts, I want to talk a little bit about Interfaith Power and Light and our history. So Interfaith Power and Light, if you're not familiar, is a national climate advocacy organization. And we actually have both a national office and around 40 affiliates around the country. So we partner with these affiliates to work together on both national and state level issues, although the majority of the work I discuss today will be taking place on a national or potentially international level because I work at the national office. You may be familiar with our Texas affiliate, which is called Texas Impact and actually predates the national office by about 25 years. All right, let's get into some fast facts about transportation. Did you know that transportation is the #1 source of climate pollution in the US?
Yes.
Thank you, Mark. Great answer. Did you know that the pollution associated with burning fossil fuels like gasoline have been linked to early death, heart attacks, respiratory disorders, stroke, and asthma? Did you know that in the United States, more than 350,000 premature deaths in 2018 were attributed to fossil fuels? And did you know that currently 98% of American passenger trips are currently taken by car? I want to zoom in on that third fact for a little bit. I think this really illustrates how bad fossil fuels are. Of course, we know that fossil fuels and burning fossil fuels are bad for the environment. Not only their extraction, but using them causes global warming, which is leading to climate change. But this is a fact that really illustrates how bad fossil fuels are for us, for humans. Burning fossil fuels, is not good for our health, and it's actively harming and killing people every day. So at Interfaith Power and Light, our transition to clean transportation looks like a multifaceted approach that includes both light duty and heavy duty vehicles, as well as other transportation systems such as micromobility, like e-scooters, as well as walking and biking infrastructure. This also includes public transportation systems like buses and rail. I do also want to note that the reason that we focus on cars, not only because 98% of American passenger trips are taken by car, it also has to do with the fact that we're a national organization. At least I work for the national office. And a lot of public transportation regulation and legislation is based on either a state level or on even a local municipal level. So it can be quite difficult to work on those issues as a national organization. So just want to flag that for y'all. So let's talk a little bit about why electric vehicles matter. And let's start off with potentially the most important reason, which is justice. So transportation pollution affects low wealth and communities of color disproportionately. And these communities are most likely to be located near major trucking corridors and freeways. This is often due to the historical racist practice of redlining, which pushed communities of color into basically segregated communities and moved white people away from those communities. At IPL, affordable and accessible electric vehicles, which are also more often smaller and more efficient, are a priority for us. The next reason is obviously the environment. Burning fossil fuels for transportation can create smog and soot, and these are harmful types of air pollution, as well as greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, nitrous oxides, and particulate matter. I want to talk a little bit about particulate matter here. That is something that we're actively working on. Particulate matter, primarily emitted from cars, is called PM 2.5. And if you're not familiar, that means that the particulates are smaller than 2.5 microns. And you might think, well, smaller pollution must not be as bad, right? But that's actually not the case. The problem is that the smaller pollutants are, the farther they're able to get into our lungs, and they're more easily absorbed into our bloodstreams. So it's actually significantly worse for us. So I did want to highlight that for a second. Emission from fossil fuel burning vehicles can also cause acid rain, eutrophication, which is when there are excessive nutrients that can harm aquatic ecosystems by lowering oxygen levels, damage to crops and forests, and harm to wildlife. Next up, we've got public health. Again, going back to that figure that in 2018, there were 350,000 deaths attributed to fossil fuels. So I want to talk about this new study out of California that came out either earlier this year or late last year that illustrated that electric vehicles have the potential to make a measurable difference in air quality. This study found that for every 20 ZEVs, or zero emission vehicles, added to a community per 1,000 people, there was a 3.2% decrease in asthma-related emergency visit rates, as well as a marginal decrease in nitrogen oxide levels. I also want to note that, firstly, this is a wonderful difference. 3.2% is absolutely significant, especially when we're talking about these really scary emergency visit rates. That being said, in many, if not most communities in the United States, there are many more than 20 vehicles per 1,000 people. So this is just illustrating how even a marginal difference, a marginal addition of electric vehicles can really make a measurable difference. And if I could snap my fingers and make every car in the country electric today, there would likely be a very significant number shown here. So, before I get too far into things, I do want to at least address the question, what about mining? And I want to say that I absolutely hear you, and mining is a significant issue in this field. Transitioning to EVs must be done in a way that builds a fossil-free supply chain and supports human labor and indigenous rights. I do want to note that a lot of times, the issues about mining are raised by the very industries that are currently polluting our ecosystems, the oil and gas industries. And those industries have already caused extractive harms upon communities across the world. And a big issue here is that oil and gas, the using of oil and gas, creates an insatiable need for more oil and more gas. It's a constant supply. There is at least the potential for mineral recycling and repurposing. That's a big part of our policy position on this, as you can see, but we also support the industry-wide establishment of FPIC. That's free, prior, and informed consent. This is a concept in the area of indigenous rights that was first established by the UN, that basically says that indigenous communities and other frontline communities should not be exposed to mining without their free, prior, and informed consent. We also support general hard rock mining reform. If you don't know, it's a little bit outdated. And by that, I mean that the last time hard rock mining was had legislation in this country was 1872. Long before any of us existed. So I think we're due for an update. We also advocate for automaker supply chain transparency and the production of vehicles, again, that prioritize mineral efficiency, which are those smaller and more energy efficient vehicles. All right, let's get into my work at IPL. So again, my position is working as the Clean Cars organizer, and my work primarily falls into two big buckets. The first bucket being work on clean car regulations or standards, that's both light and heavy duty. And then the other bucket is auto accountability, also light and heavy duty, with a focus on light duty. So let's talk about clean car standards. These are developed by EPA, NHTSA, and CARB, and they're a key factor in the transition to cleaner internal combustion engine cars and electric vehicles. Before I get too carried away, let's tackle this alphabet soup, shall we? You're probably familiar with EPA. That's the Environmental Protection Agency. It's a federal agency. In terms of cars, EPA regulates and governs pollution, greenhouse gases, and particulate matter. A big part of our fight with EPA is with that consistent regulation of pollution and really bringing that line down as we adopt more electric vehicles. NHTSA is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. NHTSA governs fuel efficiency or fuel economy. And that's basically how many miles per gallon does this car get? And lastly, we have CARB. CARB is a little bit of an outlier here. It's the California Air Resources Board. And for those who don't know, California was granted the right by the federal government to establish their own clean car standards. This was back in the 70s, because this was before national federal clean car standards existed. Excuse me. And the air quality in California was very poor at the time, and they needed immediate action to solve that problem, or to help solve that problem. So the federal government gave the California Air Resources Board the ability to govern pollutant standards in California. There's also what we call 177 states. This means when the federal government gave California the right to regulate their own clean car standards, they also said any other of the 49 states can choose to follow California's rules. However, they're not allowed to set their own rules. So California's rules are always more stringent than the national level. That being said, other states can't choose their standards that are in between California and the national standard, or less stringent than the national standard, or more stringent than California's standards. They have to choose either California or national standards. So now that we've got that out of the way, it's probably clear that we advocate for the most stringent possible rules on the most feasible expedited timeline. These standards help increase the market share of electric vehicles and reduce pollution from standard internal combustion engine cars. I also want to note that there are a lot of quote unquote on-the-shelf technologies. That means that there are technologies that automakers have already developed that we know work, such as gasoline particulate filters, that they're not using. And that's a big part in cleaning up standard internal combustion engine vehicles. All right, the latest on clean car standards is that on April 11th of this year, EPA announced the next round of clean car standards. The light duty standards, which is passenger cars and trucks, classes 1A through 2A, think sedans, SUVs, and a standard pickup, would cut carbon emissions from tailpipes up to 69% compared to 2026. However, the proposed rule for heavy-duty vehicles needs to be stronger. Heavy-duty vehicles represent a disproportionate amount of carbon pollution as compared to light-duty vehicles. Heavy-duty vehicles are classes 2B through 8, so think tractor trailers, 18-wheelers, box trucks, those gigantic pickup trucks that you think, who really needs that? And when you look at the truck bed, it's surprisingly clean. So all of those vehicles are considered heavy duty. I want to note again how important it is for EPA, CARB, and NHTSA to be regulating internal combustion engine vehicles as we move toward electrification. Because as we know, these internal combustion engine vehicles have a long life. Just because they're sold in 2023 doesn't mean that their pollution ends at the end of 2023. Some cars may be on the road for 10, 15, 20, maybe even 25 years. And although the California state standards call for a ban on new internal combustion engine vehicles by 2035, that doesn't mean that there won't be internal combustion engine vehicles on the road. So it's really important that while we pursue rapid electrification, we're also, curving downward on the curve of pollution from internal combustion engine vehicles. So here is a graph. This is from EPA, and it is illustrating the different alternatives for the new set of clean car standards. So that dotted line at the very top is the 2021 rule. And if you see, the boldest line is their proposed rule. There are three alternatives. Alternative 1, which is the most stringent, the one that we advocate for, you see there's a slight difference in its stringency to where it would be below 80 grams per mile of pollutants. Then we've got alternative, let's see which one that is. Alternative 2, which is the same kind of slope, but less stringent. And alternative 3, which comes to the same conclusion as the proposal, but has a different kind of slope. This is just a simple graph on EV adoption showing that EV fleet penetration rates by model years would really increase under the proposed EPA rules, 72%. And again, I want to note that that's not the alternative that we're advocating for. These are the proposed rules if they were adopted as is. And ACC2 is shorthand for the California standards that other states can adopt. These are electric vehicles and plug-in electric vehicle sales requirements until 2035. So as you can see, starting off about 3 years from now, we've got 35%, and then we're increasing by about 8% every year or so until 2035, where there will be 100% sales of new electric vehicles in the state. So this is a list of states that are working on California standards. So the states that have adopted the light duty standards are California, Washington, Oregon, Vermont, Virginia, Massachusetts, New York, Maryland, and Colorado partially. Colorado adopted the rules until 2032, so not fully until 2035. Medium and heavy duty looks much the same without Maryland and Virginia. And in progress, we've got quite a few states, and our focus states right now. Oh, I think someone might be unmuted. All right, we're good. Right now, our focus states are Connecticut and New Mexico, and we're currently supporting our state affiliates in those states to get ACC2, which is light duty, and ACT, which is heavy duty, on their books so they can have the most stringent standards and reap the benefits of those standards. All right, let's get into the really fun stuff, automaker accountability. This is the other half of my work, and our main target for automakers is for them to go 100% electric by 2035. We also want them to set interim targets between now and then. We also advocate for automakers to leave industry groups that lobby against clean car standards and other EV legislation and regulations. I want to make clear that automakers typically don't lobby against standards as themselves. They like to hide behind industry groups. So you might see names such as the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, or AAI. That includes majority of the major automakers in the United States. And these groups lobby against clean car standards and fuel economy standards, and generally all these standards that help us regulate these pollutants. So our main one of our main targets is Toyota. Toyota is a historically green automaker, specifically because of their work on hybrids and the Prius, but they're now intentionally resisting EV progress. I know there has been a lot of talk about Toyota's development of new battery technology, but unfortunately, industry insiders and other advocates who have been working on these issues for a long time will tell you that this is kind of a trend with Toyota. Toyota has announced a really exciting solid-state battery that could go 900 miles, about 4 times. I think they announced it in 2015 and 2017 and 2020 and now 2023, and we have yet to actually see it. Toyota is now ranked by Influence Map, which is an independent ranking group. It's been ranked as the 3rd worst company in the world for its aggressive anti-climate lobbying. And it's also actively opposed EV legislation in the US, UK, and India. It also sided with the Trump administration when the Trump administration sued California because the Trump administration did not believe that California should have the right to set their own clean car standards. And Toyota likes to tout the fact that they make the most electrified models in America, but this language is really misleading and dangerous when it includes cars that still run on dirty fossil fuels and pollute the air with exhaust. Toyota only has one EV available in the US, and it's called the BZ4X. It first launched a couple years ago, and all the cars had to be recalled because the wheels fell off. How's that for classic Toyota reliability? Again, Toyota sided with the Trump administration in a lawsuit in 2019, and their main climate commitment is kind of this flimsy promise to be carbon neutral by 2050, and we're really looking for more from them. Our other main target is GM. So GM is a little bit different because they've publicly stated all these great things. Their ultimate goal is to eliminate tailpipe emissions from new light-duty vehicles by 2035. But we want to make sure that they follow through on this progress. GM has also lobbied against life-saving clean car standards. And again, they often hide behind industry groups to do their lobbying for them. Earlier this year, you may know that GM announced its plans to retire its most popular and affordable EV, which is called the Bolt. Its replacement, you ask? The all-electric 2024 Equinox, which was meant to be a car for the everyman, around $30,000. And by that, they meant $49,000. They've also rolled back their commitment to manufacture 400,000 electric vehicles in North America through mid-2024. The last thing I want to touch on before we get to the Q&A is federal funding for electric vehicles. I just wanted to highlight this. I have written a blog post that will be linked in my resources page that goes into this in quite a lot more detail, but there's an EV tax credit for individuals and nonprofits, which is a big new development in this IRS tax code space. Qualifying EVs, plug-in hybrid vehicles, and fuel cell vehicles, which is unfortunately irrelevant for us, can receive up to $7,500. And also used EVs and plug-in hybrids can receive a tax credit up to $4,000 if it was bought for $25,000 or less, have a model year at least 2 years earlier than the year you bought it, and be bought from a dealer. So basically, the government has great incentives for those of us who might be interested in purchasing an electric vehicle for yourself. And here is my resources page. I will try to get this sent out to the right people, so all of you can access these resources. I've got lots of blog posts that I've written, as well as some webinars linked that you might find helpful. And that is the end of my presentation. Wanted to leave just a little bit of time for some questions, if that's possible. And yeah, thank you so much for your time and attention today.
Thank you, Ileagh. If you could stop sharing. Oh, there we go. For anyone who has questions, just please take yourself off mute and just go ahead. And for those that are kind of in the queue, raise your hand so we can see who else wants to go ahead and ask. Anybody? Well, I'm going to start with the first question. Oh, friends, go ahead. I didn't see you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sorry. I just got to my office from my car, so I'm able to show my face. Thank you for this wonderful and informative presentation. I do have some questions, which is, I mean, when you read the news media these days, you see that apart from Tesla and China's BYD, there are very few car companies that actually can produce an EV at profit. And in fact, and many of them suffer big losses on each EV built, so and sold. So it's even, and that is even with the 7,500 or whatever credit they may receive, even to rental companies. So or rental car companies. So there's a disconnect here, and how do we handle that?
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. I think a big issue here is specifically a lot of automakers are you may have seen some media that automakers are struggling to sell electric vehicles, and that their EVs sitting on lots. And firstly, I hear you. The auto industry has been through some major stuff in the last like 2 months. If you've been following the news, there's been major shakeups with the UAW. That being said, a big problem is the fact that automakers are absolutely convinced that the average consumer wants an $80,000 tricked out electric SUV. And we don't really. There, of course, maybe some people who want those, I understand that. But for the most part, there really is a gap in the market for vehicles that qualify for the tax credit that are not Teslas, that are small, affordable sedans and hatchbacks. There is a really big gap in the market. And I think part of the reason is because automakers are investing so much time and energy into producing these gigantic electric pickups, luxury SUVs, super fancy cars that normal people just can't afford. And I think that is one of the biggest issues that is contributing to that. Another thing is when we look at EV sales in a really zoomed in way, we're bound to see a lot of ups and downs. It's kind of a new industry. It's a new emerging now coming into the mainstream market. But I think when we zoom out in 10 years, we are going to see a really strong upward curve. It's just a momentary downturn that will be righted, if that makes sense. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. Jim, go ahead, please.
Yes, thanks for your presentation. Is IPL working on any standardized national model legislation for registrations? Recently, Texas started a surcharge on EV registrations, which snake bites the encouragement to do that. Anything along the lines of weight-based or weight miles-based model legislation to encourage some uniformity across states so that we don't have the dichotomies and irregularities that they go with state-to-state registration and are still directed at road maintenance, which is what they say the gas taxes are supposed to be for. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Actually, IPL has not worked on this issue as of this moment. I do want to note that this auto accountability and general transportation work is somewhat new. I also think that something that in general environmental advocates sometimes struggle with is the fact that we're often on the defensive. You know, there's constant attacks on the legislation that we need for the climate, and especially in terms of cars right now. So we haven't had an opportunity to work on that, but I will definitely keep an eye out for that potential legislation or regulation, because that is really important, I think, going forward. And I understand that it creates another barrier to entry for EVs.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. I have a couple of questions. Ileagh, and thank you so much. You had a great presentation. I have two questions. The first one is in regard to Toyota. And I've read in the news the same comments that you mentioned about how they really are doing all they can to fight against EVs. My question is in regard to Toyota in California. I was under the impression that California is one of the largest markets for Toyota. And how do we reconcile their opposition to these rules coming from California, where they may lose a great deal of their market share?
Wow, that is a great question. I think that Toyota has the ability to adapt to this changing market. Toyota is the world's biggest automaker. And I fully believe that if Toyota decides to go electric and really commit, then they can do it. I really believe that. So I don't think that they have to lose their market share. I think it's a choice that they're making. I also think that people often ask me, what about hydrogen vehicles? You know, isn't that an option? And unfortunately, I would basically tell you that if it was 10 years ago, that might have been a reasonable question. But now that decision has kind of already been made. And unless you live in California and only plan to drive in California, hydrogen's kind of off the table for the rest of us. So anyway, short answer is I don't think Toyota has to lose its market share or its competitive nature. I just think they need to go the direction that the market's already moving.
And my second question is about Norway and EVs. We know that Norway is, I guess, the market leader as far as countries and the percentage of EVs they've adapted. My understanding is that they sell now, well, not 90% of new cars sold in Norway are all EVs. Are there any, here's my question on that. So any takeaways, lessons learned that might help adaptation in other countries based on what was learned in Norway?
That is a really good question. Actually, it's interesting because right before I started this job, I took a trip to Norway. And that was one of the things that I noticed was how quiet it was. It's like, man, there's no like giant trucks trundling down the road. I think it is difficult because Norway is different from the US in most ways. And I will also note that a lot of this is happening because of subsidies from the Norwegian government that are attached to oil and gas production by the state. So I'm not quite sure how we can take away I'm not sure what we can take away from the transition to Norway, but the transition in Norway, but I also know that Nordic countries are known for their strong regulations. And that's something that is important and will become increasingly important for the United States. So honestly, it all goes back to those clean car standards that are really super, super important.
Thank you. Jim, go ahead. I see you have another question.
Yeah, further on Norway, I believe the situation is that because they don't have any indigenous vehicle manufacturer, for a while they've had a 25% excise tax on imports. And for EVs, they excuse that. They have essentially a duty holiday. So that clearly sells a lot more Volvo EVs there than ICEs. So I think that's the reason that Norway seems so anomalous. In addition to their natural inclination to a greener country because they've got so much hydropower. Thanks.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And this is just a little bit of a side note on the nature of transportation. One thing that I noticed while I was in Norway, I was staying in an Airbnb, just technically inside the city limits of Oslo in kind of a nice suburban neighborhood. What I noticed was even though it was a suburban like neighborhood with townhomes. There was a parking garage. There was a big parking garage at the entrance to the neighborhood where everyone parked their cars. And then you would walk to your home. And that meant that kids could play in the street, and the streets were really quiet and peaceful. And that's just a way of looking at cars that we don't really seem to have in the United States. So yeah, just wanted to share that kind of interesting anecdote.
Thank you. Anybody else with questions? Oh, Dan, go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi. I work in transportation for a local school district, so I may be part of the problem, but I I had a brief discussion with our director. I'm trying to put together like a presentation to convince the school district to adopt some EV buses. For my research that I've done, there's a lot of advantages to this. 40% lower maintenance costs, of course, less fuel costs. And I understand there's a district in Massachusetts that sells power back to the grid in the summer, and they make $3,000 every summer on these buses, per bus. So the big problem is the range right now. You get maybe 100 miles range on a bus. But to me, that would be they'd work well in the inner city. And my understanding is school districts with 20% child poverty rate or more, they can get these buses practically free. And through the IRA, it's about $330,000 to get through the IRA. The buses cost $340,000. Well, my director said, well, these buses cost more than that. They cost $400,000. And he said, besides, we're not a tier 2 school district. I tried to look up information on what he was talking about. I couldn't really find anything. Are you familiar with that that term tier 2 for school
Honestly,
districts?
I'm not. If you're interested, feel free to shoot me an email at Ileagh, my name, at interfaithpowerandlight.org, and I can connect you with some people who are working more closely with electric school bus adoption.
Yeah.
Who might be able to help. I know that a lot of that is kind of local to state or,
Yeah.
county and city stuff. So yeah, but I do just want to reiterate that I think you are absolutely correct. There are huge benefits to electrifying school bus fleets, and diesel pollution is especially
Yeah,
bad
so
for us.
it affects kids' cognitive ability and, of course, an
Yes.
explosion in asthma cases.
Yes.
So,
It's a no-brainer for inner city schools, because they have shorter routes, of course.
Yep.
And they have a lot more pollution. So
Dan,
broad,
which school district are you in that you're working
flying
for?
schools, they're very conservative. They have a large diesel fleet. They just went to gasoline because they had a lot of problem with the emissions equipment on the diesels. And there's that. Apparently, I understand they have a lawsuit against International on their emissions. So these
So-
buses are putting out a lot of pollution.
I know that broadband funding for schools and libraries is tied to the number of students who get free and reduced lunch. So I don't know if the tiers that you're talking about is related to that. But almost all of the broadband funding is tied to school lunch. So you might check into that.
Very good. Anybody else? Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, so I am a non-EV vehicle owner, but I'm definitely interested in making that my next car purchase. And probably other people that are thinking along those lines are worried about, will I be able to charge my vehicle on a regular, consistent basis? I know most electric vehicle owners charge overnight at home, but I'm wondering Ileagh, do you have any idea about the Houston area electric vehicle chargers that are available in the public?
That is a great question. I've got to be honest, I'm not too familiar with Houston EV chargers because I have a dirty little secret, which is that I drive a 2014 Camry. And it is a frequent joke between my boss and I, his Ford Focus and my Toyota Camry. However, I do want to reiterate what Mark said. The majority of EV charging is done at home and particularly overnight. I do also think that there have been a lot of new investments in charging at businesses. Like if you go to a Walmart, Electrify America has got new charging stations at a lot of those Walmarts, and a lot of different companies are putting those in. I think EV charging infrastructure is also something that we're working on. It can be difficult, and actually right now we're working on heavy duty infrastructure. So basically making the heavy duty manufacturers use that IRA money to actually invest in charging stations for heavy duty around the country to help build out this system. And that's something that I think will come with time. I will also say, in terms of the fact that we live in a major city, we're at an advantage. If you happen to live in very rural Texas or West Virginia or Wyoming, I could understand that there might be some cause for concern if you travel between cities, for example. But if you live in Houston or in the surrounding suburbs, I think you should be fine.
Yep. Marty, you'll be next. I just have one response to Mark's question about the where do you find chargers? So I am an EV owner. A bunch of us in CCL are, and just to share a tip there, that there's a free phone app available which will tell you where all of the EV chargers are nearby wherever you are. They show maps, and they if you have your location turned on, you'll see exactly what's available close by you. And that app is called Plug Share, PLUGSHARE. It's a free download. If you want to find out where the closest charges are to you, that's a great way to find out. Marty, go ahead, please. Take yourself off mute and go ahead. You're on mute, Marty. You have to take yourself off mute.
Okay.
There you go. We can hear you now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we in Galveston, Texas, which is certainly not the country, we asked the city manager about turning the police cars into EVs. And his problem, he said, is that it would take twice the fleet because of the time it takes to recharge them. Am I clear? Is the question clear?
Is the question, is he right?
Yeah, that's the question.
So I think there may be some truth to this. So for those who may not know, there are 3 levels of EV charging: 1, 2, and 3. 3 being the fastest, 2 being medium fast, and 1 being respectfully a snail's pace. Now, if you were charging all your police cars on a level 1 charger, yeah, you would need a lot of cars because it does not charge quickly. You could get maybe 60 miles overnight. That being said, the number of people who are charging on level 1 chargers, few, in my opinion. The majority of home charging is level 2, and that's significantly faster. I also think that for, emergency vehicles or work commercial vehicles like that there could be use for level 3 DC fast charging. And in terms of fast charging, I do not think that would be an issue. I think with a kind of situation like that, they would need to come up with a plan to mitigate the fact that charging does take more time than refueling a gas car, but to the level that they would need double the number of cars seems fishy to me.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, I've read in the news that there are many police departments that already are using EVs for their police cars very successfully. They're very happy with them. And so whatever they're doing, there are ways to get around that. And to Ileagh's point about charging on a level 2 charger, which is what I have in my garage, to completely recharge from a routine trip, you're talking about an hour to recharge. Of course, it depends on how long you drive. If you drive further, it may take longer, but other police departments are able to work around that. Any other questions? Anybody? Okay, well, Ileagh, I'd like to thank you very much. It was really a wonderful presentation and a lot of good questions that we had. If you wouldn't mind giving your presentation slide deck to Mark, and Mark will get
Sure.
it to me, and we'll get it published to all of our
All right.
volunteer
Yeah.
members.
Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate your time and attention and this opportunity today. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, before you leave, let's we always like to get a group picture. If everybody can turn on their cameras, and we have a pretty good turnout today, so let me just do one thing. Okay, and let me try to go ahead and get that now. I'll do a countdown. 3, 2, 1, smile. And let me just make sure that came out okay. Yep, I got it. Okay,
Awesome.
thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. I will drop my email in the chat if anyone has any further questions. Thanks, y'all.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen again, and we'll get back to the presentation. I'm sorry, the slide deck. Can everybody see my screen again?
I can.
Okay, great. So the next topic here, we'd just like to remind everybody about our CCL monthly calling campaign. We're not going to take time to do it during our meeting, but the web link is there. It's the cclusa.org/call. And we do like to remind all of our volunteers to go ahead and go to that web link, follow the script, which just takes a few minutes, and to call your elected representatives and our state, our U.S. senators, Cornyn and Cruz as well. Thank you so much for doing that. And oh, before I forget, Judith, you mentioned you have to leave earlier, and I'm going to jump down to your section so you can give your talk and before you have to leave. Go ahead.
Yeah, we still have 3 openings for liaisons. So if you are in Al Green, Michael McCall, or Brian Babin's district, we're looking for a liaison to those offices. The only other thing I wanted to do today was have people share about the meetings that they've had this past week. I particularly, we met with Al Green's office, and that's what the picture on here is. And I was also included in the meeting with Brian Babin's office. There were 2 very different meetings. The legislative person that we met with in Al Green's office was pretty new and open to all of our ideas, and I think was interested in learning from us as much as we were interested in learning from her. The meeting with Brian Babin's office had a longtime staff person who was very well versed on all of the legislation that we were talking about. So it was a very different conversation. And the interesting thing about their office is that most of his constituents are out in Beaumont and Port Arthur, and they're on a different grid than the ERCOT grid. I asked him how that makes Dr. Babin's thinking different, and he didn't really have an answer for that, but promised that he would look up. But I would think there would be significant different thoughts about the Big Wires Act if you were in that district. But does anybody want to share more about the 2 meetings that I attended or talk about any meetings that they attended?
Judith, how many meetings were we able to have in the Houston area?
I do not know. I know that there was meetings on Tuesday. I think both Cornyn and Lizzie Fletcher might have been on Tuesday.
All right, I'll answer regarding, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, John.
I'll answer regarding Lizzie Fletcher. We had the initial contacts with her 3 weeks ago, and then leading up, everything was going just like it's done every time that I've met with her in the past. I felt real confident about it. We had a team with I think 4 or 5 of us that were going to meet and knew what we were going to say, but I kept trying to get that final time, and it reached a point where they weren't responding back, and I sent 2 or 3 emails, phone call to the scheduler, and finally just gave up. I don't know what happened. The scheduler did tell me at one point, he said that the person we were going to meet with was the chief of staff, Ben Jackson, and but he's actually deputy chief of staff, and he's filling in at this busy time for the chief of staff who's on maternity leave. And so he's also the climate energy guy. And so I think he's just way too busy, and we didn't get to meet with him. When we met with him in June, he was very friendly, we were glad to see us, gave us the full 30 minutes. So to cut this short, we did not meet, but I don't think it's a problem with them. I think maybe they're just too busy.
Thank you, John. John, even though you didn't get to meet, we're able to send over our primary and secondary asks, so at least they know what we wanted to talk about.
Yes, I had already sent the primary ask as sort of a preparation, and both of the asks. And
Great.
so what I'm going to do now is grab them and any other documents that look like we would have wanted them to have, and send them and say, please read this. Sorry we couldn't meet.
Thank you. Also, I'm seeing in the chat from Jenny. Jenny had a similar problem scheduling a meeting with Representative Sylvia Garcia. That's unfortunate. But thank you, John, and thank you, Jenny, for making the effort to try to get that scheduled. Okay.
So should we try to continue scheduling meetings into next week? I'm not sure that it would be, that going past next week would be a good idea, but
I would say that there's no harm. Right?
Yep.
Well, I had to in my last communication with the scheduler, I pointed out that sorry, we're running out of time here. It's I'd like to meet next week, but it can be the week after also. So I went ahead and gave them an opportunity to delay it even further, and still didn't get any response. So
I've gotten no response from Sheila Jackson Lee's office, and my thought is that I will try again on Monday and see if I can. The 2 people that have met with us previously are who I emailed, and I thought I would try to reach them in person on Monday and try one more time.
Yep, it's worth a try. Judith, anything else then?
So does anybody have a meeting scheduled or reports to make? Besides, that's all that I have for today. Except to thank Dory. I don't think she's here. She got our 2 constituents for the meeting with Al Green.
Yep, that was great.
Yes, it was.
Okay, we'll go on then. Thank you, Judith.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go back up to where I was. Okay, so again, our monthly calling campaign, just a reminder, we really like everybody to do that if you're able to. It just takes a few minutes, and the best time to do it is on the weekend because nobody there will answer. You'll just leave a message on their voicemail. Okay, next item here. Our CCL Cocktails and Conversations is really a great event that we have monthly. We had several great meetings with guest speakers earlier this year. We have our next CCL Cocktails and Conversations coming up December 2nd, 4 to 5 p.m. remote via Zoom. We'll have our CCL volunteer Larry Howe talking on the topic of the review of the Texas 2023 legislative session, and the web link is there if anybody has an interest. Also for December, we have our annual year-end holiday gathering. We call it our Gathering for Cookies and Cocoa Holiday Cheer. So that will be scheduled December 9th. It'll be an in-person event at the Emerson UU Church, and all of the details will be in our next newsletter coming out in early December. I hope to see everybody there. It's usually a very fun event that we like to do. And we also just recently finished our CCL Fall National Conference. I'm guessing pretty much everybody's aware of that. There were many, many sessions, and they were all recorded. They're available on YouTube at the playlist web link here that's included in the slide. And let me just
Can you tell me, was the Van Jones talk recorded?
All of them were recorded. Let me,
because I missed it and I haven't been able to find a link to that, just the links to the others.
Yep. I'm going to put our web link here into the chat again. This was the web link at the very top of the slide deck for those that joined late. Go to this web link, you'll get access to the slide deck. Just scroll down to this slide talking about the national conference, and you can click right on there to get that. Okay. Did anybody have any feedback they want to share quickly about attending the Fall National Conference remotely? This is all remote on Zoom. Anybody want to share any thoughts on that? Okay, we'll continue on. Next up here, I wanted to recognize all of our volunteers who made financial donations to our CCL Houston chapter in 2023. And that was Dory Wolf, Mark Haranon, and myself. We all made financial donations. We don't spend a whole lot of money, but we do have a budget that requires some amount of money to continue operating and doing the things we do. For example, simply sending out our monthly newsletter distribution costs money. We do that through the MailChimp application. We have to pay a monthly fee every time we send out a distribution. We like to attend our really critical Earth Day celebration event, tabling event downtown, and that costs money. So miscellaneous things cost money, and if you all can afford even just a $25 donation, we really would appreciate it, and it would help us tremendously. I've included a web link here where you can make that donation online very easily, painlessly, and many of our volunteers work at businesses, corporations that can also potentially match your donation. That's what I did with my recent donation. I work for Hewlett Packard, and I submitted that through the company website, and they matched dollar for dollar, so basically doubled what I donated. And also following up on the theme of our budget, which is getting the money that we have available is getting very low, because we do, although we minimize our expenses, we do have to pay out for certain things. And as I mentioned last month, we really would like to have a volunteer that may want to help volunteer their time to do some fundraising for us. And if anyone has an interest in that, if you've done that before and you enjoy doing that kind of thing, please let me know. Okay, now we're back to our lever status reports. Judith already provided her update. I'm going to skip down to Court to talk about grass tops.
Hey there. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And for grass tops, for those who need a quick refresher, this is the tool that we use to go to individuals, large influence in the community, or businesses with that same type of influence, who will either endorse our carbon fee pricing policy and or something akin to climate solution policies. And so we've had several types of initiatives going on this year, one of which is been reaching out to representatives. Like Joe mentioned, on December 2nd, Larry Howe will be discussing Texas state leg. But for ahead of our cookies and cocoa holiday cheer gathering, I'm gonna send a message out to our 24 Harris County state reps to see if they would like to attend. I would like to comment that Representative Shaw's office actually reached out earlier this week, interested in joining one of our virtual meetings. So I'm hopeful that either herself or her office might come to our holiday party. Another project we've been working on is Texas-wide academia, getting academics to endorse climate-based solutions, carbon pricing. And Dan, I'll be reaching out to you and also about buses. And Ileagh, I'll also reach out to you because Joe has done some really good research on this, and there's a couple just various either counties or HISD, another ISD who are looking into or have gotten funding on buses. And so Jim, I think you said that Cy-Fair is doing that. And so it seems like this is is trending to be a good time to really lean into this sector to see if we can get some support. I can take any questions, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Cord. Any questions about grass tops? Okay, I'm going to continue on. Mark, grassroots. Mark, are you still out there?
I'm trying to come into the video. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So let's see. I have reached out to an environmental group, Coalition for Environment, Equity, and Resilience, but unfortunately I have not received a response. I did offer, since this was an initial contact with that group, I did offer to help them with anything that we could help with, rather than ask them if we could, if they would give us a presentation, for example, but I haven't heard back. So a little bit disappointing, but I should follow up on that in case the person missed the email.
Sorry, can I jump in? I know someone who works there, so I'll put you in contact.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. So in terms of future tabling, we received an invitation to table at the Sunnyside Solar Summit on December 1st. That's a Friday. I believe Judith has volunteered to be one of the persons at that. Correct me if I'm wrong. And
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And if anybody else, whether you're experienced at tabling or you just want to try it, you're welcome to come to that. Very easy. You just converse one-on-one with passerbys. And basically what we try to do is relate to their interest in doing something about climate and try to connect with them in that way. Yeah, there's my contact information. I do have a new phone number, so feel free to reach out to me if you need any more information. That's all I have, Joe.
Thank you, Mark. There was a quick question in the chat from Jenny about our holiday party and what time will that be. Jenny, we haven't actually set a time for that yet. although historically we've always done that in the later afternoon, somewhere around 4 p.m. But we have to, our steering committee team needs to agree on what time we want that. And Dory helps coordinate that because it's at the Emerson UU Church. So we have to figure out what time that will be. Oh, and Court put the same answer into the chat. Thank you, Court. Okay, I'm going to move on. And now the media team, where I'm the leader for that. And on this slide here, I always like to include the web links to our previous newsletters. That's one of the main things that I do as being the media leader. And so you see the web link there for our October newsletter and the November newsletter we just sent out on Monday of this week. We also have a presence on social media, although the time that I've had available to work on that has really dwindled quite a bit. If anyone has an interest in helping out with doing our social media, that's always welcome. We do have a high school student in Katy who's doing some posting on our Instagram account, and that's really helpful. So that's great. And then the other big thing we do is we like to submit letters to the editor. And we have a new volunteer, Dorothy. Dorothy, I think you're out there. I saw your name there. Dorothy just worked on submitting an LTE this week to the Eastern Chronicle, and we kind of talked about that together and collaborated. And so thank you, Dorothy, for getting that sent out. Any questions?
My pleasure. I'm looking for another one, but it's not a lot of articles that I was hoping for that are front page. So I'm like, okay, when's my chance?
Exactly. And thank you for attending our meeting today, Dorothy. It's really great. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay. Moving on then.
I just sent out an LTE to the Chronicle. I haven't had a chance to check today. It hasn't been published yet, about the Oxy carbon capture facility for to capture 500,000 carbon units a year, 500,000 tons of carbon a year. And that's not near enough.
Yep. And thank you, Dan, for doing that. And I like to remind the folks that do submit any LTEs, if you do end up getting published, please drop me a quick email, because we always like to include those in our newsletters once they get published. So, okay. And Dory was not able to make our call today, but Dory is our leader for the chapter development team. And so this is Dory's slide. I'll do it for her. So first of all, thank you everybody for joining our meeting. That's great. And we're always looking for new volunteers to help out. The more volunteers we have that volunteer, the more we can do, the more effective we can be as an organization. And I know that Dory also looks for volunteers to help out with her in chapter development. We like to reach out to new members that join us, just calling them, finding out what their interest level is, where they would like to fit in. And so anyone that has an interest in chapter development, you can reach out to Dory directly. And that's pretty much our agenda for today. And I'm going to stop sharing. And here, really towards the end of the meeting, we have about 15 minutes left before we actually end. Just we have a round robin discussion. If anyone likes to share any feedback on anything related to what we're doing, any other questions, suggestions, please just jump in.
I have a question about the lobbying. I noticed that we're still looking for someone to help out with Brian Babin's district. I am in that district, but I also joined CCL a week ago, and I actually haven't taken the training for lobbying, and I'm also not going to be available next week. Is there a time scale for when you're looking for people? Like, was this for something specifically for this coming week, or was this kind of for a longer term sort of thing?
So we have met with Brian Babin. Who was it that I can't see who was talking?
That's Dorothy.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
It's
so we met with Brian Babin this week. And so the next push for lobbying will be in-person lobbying in Washington in June. So you might think about doing that. You can definitely call their office, with the calling campaign every month. But I will make sure that you are on my list for Brian Babin, because we always need more people. And it will be this time next year that we have another local meeting that more than likely will be on
and if-
Zoom. Yeah, go ahead.
Judith, if I could just pop in, Dorothy, so nice to meet you. And actually too, we don't even have a liaison in Babin's district, so I'm sorry you weren't able to join us. We did reach out to a list that Joe had sent us, and you probably weren't on that list yet. But Will Carter is the regional director in Brian Babin's office, and if you put your email in the chat, I can email you the stuff that we sent them, and we're certainly asking all his constituents to follow up with the, obviously the bills that we went over in the meetings last week. But if you're interested in the liaison position, there you could reach out, to Joe about that after doing some of the trainings. And we've got some other really good key people in the district, like Jana Palush, and other volunteers. I think you guys got a really good team there in Brian Babin's district. And that was one of our successful meetings this past week. We had one with Al Green's office and Brian Babin's office. And it's kind of disappointing we were unsuccessful in some of these other offices, but thank you.
Jenny, were you able to get a group photo from that meeting that you can share?
I was, so I need to email that to you, and I apologize that I have not done it yet. So thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, we'll include it in the next newsletter.
Okay.
So, Dorothy, if we end up having another meeting, you could attend another meeting as a non-constituent and see what it's like. I'll keep you.
I would be interested.
Okay.
I know I want to finish taking the trainings to know what I'd actually be volunteering for before I actually sign my name up for anything. But I definitely would love to know what it is that you guys talked about with Brian Babin, because one of the things I have been wondering about is, so we're in Texas, I'm pretty sure my area is inside ERCOT, but we also definitely had suffered in Storm Uri. But if there's other parts in this same district that are not in ERCOT, big wires would have helped us immensely. So if that is a talking point that we're pushing with him, I would love to learn more about this.
One of the things that he said is that we actually did take electricity from a couple of places that we have connections, but it wasn't announced.
Yeah, that's also really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting that half of that district is actually in is it the MISO or the MIDO, the Midwest grid. And so I thought it was just El Paso and like the Panhandle that were not part of ERCOT, but that's good to know and find out that East Texas can take advantage of the Big Wires Act and this regional distribution requirements that the bill would require. But his office seemed really receptive and the coastal resilience, and I don't know, it just seemed like there was definitely areas where we can meet eye to eye, and that's why I think this bipartisan approach is so important to our lobbying efforts.
Larry, did you have a question or some feedback?
Well, I was in a meeting in Arkansas with the Arkansas Senator Bozeman, and Arkansas and Louisiana and my part of the Woodlands is actually in the MISO group. And so we talked about that.
Very interesting.
That is fascinating, because I know I had like some friends, like, a few not that long away, and some of them had lost power for so long that they straight up just flew to Las Vegas for a week. And
we only lost electricity for a couple of hours.
Yeah, I lost electricity for about 4 hours, if that. Whereas they lost power for like at least 3 or 4 days. Oh. So the difference there, I wonder what we could bring up and, emphasize and say, look how wonderful this was, or look how wonderful it could have been if we had.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Very good points. I just wanted to mention, I noticed, Nan, you're in the meeting here. You're on mute right now. I don't think I've noticed you joining our meetings before. Are you new to CCL? A new volunteer? You're on mute. I can see you, but I can't hear you. Go ahead.
I'm not a volunteer for CCL. I'm trying to keep myself down to 2 groups. And because if you spread yourself too thin, you just don't doesn't work. So
Right.
I volunteer for the climate action team of First Unitarian Universalist Church. And then I'm in a national group or an international group called Kiva, which does microlending. But CCL's been on my radar for a long time, and I admire y'all. And I'm, so I'm cheering you, and I made a donation and all that. I'm interested if one of the funner things I did was ask my church to endorse CCL, and that worked wonderfully. And I kind of wouldn't mind. I kind of keep tempted to do it again with some other church, but that just sort of hadn't come together.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and for supporting us. I'm just curious, how did you find out about this monthly meeting?
I'm on your newsletter.
Oh, so you must be an actual volunteer, but maybe you're just not active. You must have joined us at some point.
I'm a member, but I'm not active. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today.
I believe, don't you go to Emerson Unitarian with Dory? Is that right?
No, First.
Oh, First Unitarian. Okay.
We need to connect all these groups, I mean, y'all have a great group, but we could be better connected with everybody.
Right.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, anybody else? I don't want to keep anybody past our time, but we do have a few more minutes if there's any more feedback or discussion. Okay, if not, I just want to thank everybody for joining us and have a wonderful, great rest of the weekend. Bye now.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.